I want to start off by saying that Samsung nailed the hype part. Even a skeptic like me felt the hype, but when I finally got my hands on it, it just felt like a new Samsung. I mean, apart from the super smooth 120Hz display, I just didn't feel like it's worth a switch from my already great performing OnePlus 7 Pro. Oh, wait a minute. Then I realized that Samsung's operating system is the one that's holding me back from really liking this phone. But it's not a bad thing. Many people out there is completely happy with Samsung's One UI. So, upon using it for a little more, I have a lot of things to say. Let's start off with the design of this smartphone. I wouldn't say it's beautiful, but it definitely stands out from other phones. The biggest change you might have noticed is that huge camera module. And if you zoom in a little bit, you can see the 100x space zoom, which we will get to later. But first, let's talk about screen. The curve is much more tighter now. It's barely visible unless you take a peek. I guess that's what people wanted nowadays, so yeah. And I can't tell you how much I love the 120Hz display, but there's a huge downside. The 120Hz refresh rate is only available at 1080p. Yeah, but don't get me wrong, the 1080p is very good and most people won't even notice any difference, but we are still paying a premium here. And I'm a huge fan of high resolution stuff. I mean, just the feel of having to max out at 1080p while watching YouTube after shelling out $1,000, it just doesn't feel right. This is supposed to be the Ultra, right? Well, I personally think that they should at least allow us to choose that option. Yes, I know it would take a huge hit on battery life, but I'm sure many enthusiasts out there would appreciate it. So yeah, this is a bummer for me. But if you don't notice any difference, well, good for you. And let's get over with that rant and talk about software experience. Personally, not a huge fan, but it has been improved quite a lot. And as I said earlier, many people out there surprisingly enjoy Samsung's One UI. And the Snapdragon 865 really handle everyday tasks like a champ. And yeah, you shouldn't worry about performance if you're getting a Flash. But all of that comes along with weight. Yeah, this phone is really heavy, coming at 225 grams. It is at the limit of what my DJI Osmo Mobile 3 could handle. This thing is much bigger, thicker, and heavier than my OnePlus 7 Pro, which is already a big boy. And all of that weight comes from the huge 5000 mAh battery. This phone could hold up all day, even at its peak refresh rate. Well, I personally think that the heft and thickness feels good, but it's definitely something to keep in mind, especially if you're coming from the S10 Plus, which is super light and thin. The stereo speaker is now slightly improved, and for consuming content, it's a great phone, but as I said, it's only 1080p if you opted for the high refresh rate. With all of that aside, let's address the huge elephant camera in the room. If we take a look at the spec sheet, this thing has 108 megapixel sensor, 100x space zoom, and 8K video recording. My first thought was it's too good to be true. Well, I think I'm right to some extent. But don't get me wrong, this camera can produce amazing images with insane amount of clarity. But here's where it gets interesting. There are some problems with this camera. You know, the type of problems you wouldn't worry about if you are getting a flagship. It can't focus really well. I mean, having a huge sensor is great, a lot of light could get through, and you can get shallow depth of field. But with a smartphone, it's a different story. Since they are cramming a huge sensor in that tiny little space, the bokeh is not as smooth as you would expect. Instead, you would get some sort of fringing. I mean, there's a long explanation to this, but I'm not a professional by any means, so I think we'll skip that. The depth of field is really shallow, to a point where I think it's more of a curse than a blessing. In a close-up, a part of the product won't be in focus, and this makes it really challenging for the phone to pull focus. It hunts a lot for focus and sometimes it just won't. They have pushed a few software updates that fixed this issue, but it's not as good as you'd want it to be. But if it finally pulls focus and the fringing is not that visible, you could get some real banger shots. The 8K video really got me excited when I heard about it, but it's not what I expected. Yes, it can shoot at full 8K resolution, but you are sacrificing a lot of features. Immediately, you would notice that it crops in a significant amount, focus tracking is not available, and of course, file sizes are going to be astronomical, so yeah. But just stick with 4K unless you really know what you're getting into. And let's get to the 100x space zoom. The periscope camera at the back allows you to zoom in quite a lot, but at 100x, the image quality is just terrible. You should only use it to show off to your friends and nothing more than that. I mean, I wouldn't say it's useless, but it's fun to have, especially at 30x, the image is kinda usable. Finally, I want to say that this phone is not perfect, but it's not perfect for a reason. This phone is trying to push things to the limits, but there are some things that takes time to be perfect. And if you have that much money to spend on a phone and get a glimpse of the future, why not? I'll see you guys in the next video, and as always, bye.